Britain has faced difficult budgets before. Budgets shaped by recession, by global crisis, by austerity and by political turmoil. But this budget this year stands apart. And that is exactly what makes this moment so unsettling. There's no global recession swallowing markets, no worldwide pandemic shutting down economies, no sudden war shaking the foundations of international trade. Yet somehow, despite the absence of any major external shock, Britain is heading into one of the most chaotic and directionless budgets in recent memory. It is confusion without a major crisis. When a budget becomes this unpredictable in relatively calm global conditions, calm at least in comparison to moments like 2008 or 2020, it raises a difficult question. If the government cannot offer clarity and stability now, what happens when Britain faces a genuine crisis on the scale of the 2008 financial crisis or the 2020 pandemic? This budget is defined not by strategy, but by uncertainty. A budget marked by leaks, rumours, reversals, panic, market reactions and confusing signals that have left Britain, investors, economists and ordinary working families unsure of what the 26th of November will hold. Take, for instance, a recent tweet from Ed Conway, Sky News economics and data editor. You've probably seen him before presenting those detailed graphics on Sky News. Here's what he had to say about this budget. I've been reporting on UK budgets for decades, so perhaps worth underlining something. This degree of market volatility ahead of a budget is not normal. Underlines the extent to which UK has been in the bond vigilantes' crosshairs since the mini-budget. This could get very bumpy. Or take this clip from ITV's political editor Robert Peston, taken from his podcast, The Rest is Money.
Just it's actually chaos ahead of a budget I've never experienced. I've been around this territory for decades. I've lost count of how many budgets I've covered, and I've never known chaos. It is really remarkable.
Even Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, someone you would naturally expect to criticise the Labour government, admitted that she has never seen this level of chaos in the run-up to a budget.
It's good if they're not going to increase income taxes, but the truth is they shouldn't be increasing any taxes at all. But I've never seen a government do this in the run-up to a budget. I have never seen this level of chaos, this level of irresponsibility.
So why is this budget being viewed as so chaotic, and should we all be worried?
PM, you promised to end the chaos when you were elected, but since the summer we've had winter fuel U-turn, welfare U-turn, Rayner's resignation, Mandelson's sacking, Andy Burnham's leadership drama, the Wes Street in number 10 showdown, pitch rolling and income tax rises only to U-turn. You haven't ended chaos, you are the chaos.
The week commencing on the 10th of November began with expectations that the government would raise income tax by 2p, a move heavily briefed to newspapers and widely assumed to be the centrepiece of the budget. Then, suddenly, the plan was abandoned. Markets were rattled, journalists scrambled, economists questioned what had changed, and political insiders described the mood inside government as frantic. From that moment onward, the budget narrative collapsed into a fog of uncertainty. The reversal didn't calm the situation, it intensified it. Because if the government was confident enough to brief such a significant tax rise to every major newspaper in the country, only to drop it overnight, then one question hangs over everything. What exactly changed in those few hours? Government insiders say the dramatic U-turn was made after official forecasts showed the government shortfall was closer to 20 billion than 30 billion, allowing the Chancellor to take a less politically risky path. But here's the problem. A lot of people aren't buying that explanation. Yes, the government claims that the income tax U-turn happened because the fiscal shortfall turned out to be closer to 20 billion than 30 billion, but as soon as this reason was given, doubts began to surface. Many pointed out that if such a shift in the numbers were genuinely responsible, the OBR, which had already been working closely with the Treasury for weeks, would have been aware of those changes well in advance. The OBR does not suddenly discover £10 billion overnight. Any meaningful movement in the forecasts would have been flagged earlier, long before ministers briefed newspapers about an income tax rise. And that is precisely why many now believe something else must have forced the government's hand, something not explained by the numbers alone. The Institute of Directors went further, saying that while the Treasury insists such shifts are normal, What is not normal is for such dramatic changes to be publicly visible, and across the markets, analysts have quietly questioned whether this was really about forecast revisions at all, or whether the government panics amid the political turbulence. In other words, many believe the £20 billion explanation for scrapping the income tax rise is simply too convenient. And that sense of doubt only deepened when another revelation emerged, one that pointed not to the numbers, but to number 10 itself. According to reporting late in the week, the pressure to abandon the income tax rise didn't originate with the Treasury at all. It came from inside Downing Street. As one report put it plainly and bluntly, Downing Street was blamed on Friday for forcing Rachel Reeves to reverse budget plans to raise income tax in what was described as a panic move to save Sir Keir Starmer's premiership. Labour MPs, ministers and the markets were left stunned by a Financial Times report that the Chancellor has now abandoned the measure despite 2 weeks of clear hints in public speeches that she was poised to break the party's manifesto pledge. That single paragraph crystallised why so many people no longer accepted the official OBR-based explanation. It painted a picture of a government scrambling behind the scenes, not because forecasts shifted, but because political tensions erupted at the very top. The fact that MPs, ministers and even the markets were left stunned reinforced the idea that this was a last-minute, leadership-driven intervention rather than a carefully well-thought-out economic policy shift. And that leads to the bigger question at the heart of this drama. Why did Sir Keir Starmer's premiership need saving in the first place? In the days leading up to the reversal, whispers inside Westminster had grown louder. Reports circulated of internal frustration, collapsing discipline among senior advisors, and fears of a potential leadership challenge gathering momentum. Headlines spoke of Starmer's allies warning about plots forming behind closed doors. His health secretary, Wes Streeting, was suddenly being framed, fairly or unfairly, as a potential rival. Meanwhile, Starmer had been rocked by criticism over the handling of his own team, with MPs openly calling for the dismissal of his chief of staff. In addition to this, polling has been brutal. Opinion voting intention, 5th of November 2025, found more than half of the UK publicly believe both Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Chancellor Rachel Reeves should resign, according to our latest polling. The findings reveal deepening public distrust in Labour's handling of the economy, with most expecting the upcoming autumn budget to be unfair and to bring further tax rises. Ipsos found that Labour equals historic low in Ipsos records, as 8 in 10 think Britain is getting worse as a place to live. The Labour Party itself has sunk to historic lows, with one poll putting their national vote share at just 18%, matching their weakest ever level on record. In moments like that, a deeply controversial income tax rise, one that risked breaking a manifesto pledge, would have poured fuel on an already burning fire. For Starmer, allowing the tax hike to go ahead could have triggered a political meltdown at the worst possible moment. This is why many believe the income tax U-turn wasn't just about economic forecasts, it was about stabilising a premiership and a party that was starting to look dangerously exposed. In the scramble to plug the fiscal gap without touching headline income tax rates, the government has reportedly explored a long list of unusual and unexpected tax options, many of which have raised eyebrows across Westminster. Among the ideas floated to journalists were proposals for a milkshake tax, a mansion tax, an expanded wealth tax, removing tax breaks for professionals in partnerships, higher capital gains taxes, increases to council tax bans, and even a sin tax, which is a tax specifically placed on products the government wants to discourage people from consuming, such as sugary foods, alcohol, vaping products, or ultra-processed snacks. Other suggestions included lowering or freezing income tax thresholds far beyond previous plans, effectively dragging millions more people into higher tax brackets without ever raising the basic rate. The sheer variety of these trial balloon proposals has left many confused, signalling a government still searching for direction. And the concern is that this patchwork approach may do more harm than good. Stephen Millard, Deputy Director of the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, warned, "There are two dangers here. First, by resorting to smaller changes to lots of marginal taxes, the Chancellor risks making the overall tax system even more complicated and inefficient, in the sense of creating more distortions in the economy. Second, this would make it harder for the Chancellor to build a large buffer against her fiscal rules, as we've seen over the past year. Having a small buffer creates uncertainty and endless speculation about further tax rises, given it would only take a small downgrade in the UK's growth prospects to wipe the buffer out. As the days have passed, the consequences of this chaotic pre-budget period have begun to spill beyond Westminster and into the real economy. Budgets are not just political theatre, they shape expectations, influence behaviour, and move markets long before a single policy is officially announced. And this year, the turmoil has seeped into every corner of economic life. One of the clearest signs of this instability can be seen in the housing market. In normal times, homeowners, buyers and sellers make decisions based on a broad understanding of what the tax environment will look like. But this year, the rumour mill has been relentless. A mansion tax, capital gains tax changes, council tax re-evaluations, higher stamp duty, the removal of property-related allowances, every one of these have been floated, briefed, denied, or considered, only to be replaced hours later by something else. The result is paralysis. Rightmove recently reported the highest percentage of sellers cutting asking prices for this time of year since 2012, a sign of deep uncertainty spreading across the market. People don't know what's coming, so they hesitate, and hesitation is one of the most powerful drags on any economy. This unpredictability also changes how people behave more broadly. Households delay big purchases, unsure if taxes will rise. Businesses hold back investment, waiting to understand how new rules might hit their bottom line. Investors retreat to safer assets as gilt yields swing up and down in response to every rumour. Even workers begin to question whether taking on extra hours or earning more will push them suddenly into shifting tax thresholds. In short, confidence, the quiet engine that drives economic activity, begins to erode. And once confidence cracks, it becomes incredibly difficult to restore. That is why economists have repeatedly warned that even the process of budget making matters. Stability, predictability, and clarity are not luxuries. They are foundations of a functioning economy. When those foundations are shaken by leaks, reversals, mixed messages, and political firefighting, the effects ripple outwards in ways that can last for months. What makes this situation even more unusual is the broader context. This level of confusion is happening without a global crisis forcing the government's hand. There is no pandemic, no financial crash, no international emergency creating unprecedented pressure, and yet the atmosphere feels like one of crisis management. Each day brings a new briefing, a new reversal, or a new headline about internal panic. This is not how a government behaves when it is in control. It's how a government behaves when it is struggling to keep its footing. The uncomfortable truth is that Britain is entering a budget with even more questions than answers about taxes, about leadership, about economic strategy, about credibility, and about whether these people making these decisions can provide the stability the country needs. This is why so many analysts, journalists, investors, and even senior politicians have described this budget as the most chaotic in recent memory, not simply because of what is being proposed, but because of the way it has unfolded. A budget shaped not by calm planning, but by volatility, doubt, political pressure, and uncertainty at the very top of government. And that is why, long before the Chancellor stands at the dispatch box on the 26th of November, one conclusion has already formed in the minds of many. This is the most chaotic budget in history. Is this the most chaotic lead up to a budget you've ever seen? Let us know in the comments below.